today we're working on a brake pull. The difference between a brake pull and any other pull, like a low tire or worn suspension parts, is when you hit the brakes, you'll feel it and you'll may have to compensate. I'll show you here in a minute. Mine pulls to the left, so I have to compensate to the right. Now as your brakes get hotter, it'll get worse and the faster speeds. So watch when I hit the brakes. See, now I've got to pull it back over to keep it from hitting oncoming traffic or getting off the shoulder of the road. So mine's pulling to the left. I've got to compensate to the right so we know that it's the right side. Either the right side is froze, not working, not doing its job, or the left side's overdoing its job. So when we get back to the shop, we'll check and see just what's causing that. Now what I use is a thermal gun, and that's the quickest way. What you're going to do is you're going to find out that one of the brakes are hotter than the other. Now in most cases like this has got floating calipers, and floating calipers have slide pins that'll freeze up, and that's the most common cause, but that's not the only cause it could be. The piston could be stuck and it's allowing it to come out just a little bit, but either way it's going to be overheating that rotor, and we'll be able to tell it with a thermal gun. Watch again up here at this turn. So it's definitely a brake pull and not a tire pull or a suspension issue. Now as they get hotter, it'll get worse. So it may start out mild, but that's giving you a heads up that you got a brake issue going on. So we'll get it back to the shop, figure out what's going on with it. Now this truck has floating calipers, which means that it's got one or two pistons on one side and it actually slides back and forth on slide pins. Now a fixed caliper will have pistons on both sides and it'll be mounted in a fixed position. So it kind of tells you, the name of it tells you what kind of calipers you got. Now in most cases, if you've got a fixed caliper, you can still have the same issue if it's got a piston on each side or two pistons on each side. One of the pistons could be sticking, and you'll be able to tell that in the way that your pad is wearing. That's just like this. We'll be able to tell it, should be able to tell it by the inside pad or the outside pad will be worn more than the other one. Now usually like a low tire or a suspension, if it's involved in that, this has got a little bit of drift to the right, so that tire may be a little low, or it may have some suspension like a camber issue. The camber, if you think about riding a bicycle or a motorcycle, when the tire gets, whichever side the tire is leaning towards, that's the side it wants to drift to. It usually doesn't have a big pull to it, but it'll drift. Now if your caster is bad, most of the time it'll wander. It don't want to center itself. It'll just wander back and forth, and you have to always be trying to keep control of the steering wheel to keep it centered to the highway. Notice it's getting worse as I heat the rotors up. And if you look, the seals inside a caliper are square. When I mean, instead of it being round and sets down in a round hole, they're usually square. It sets down in a flat hole going all the way around the piston. You know, they're round to go around the piston, but if you look at the seal itself, it's square shaped instead of round shaped. And what it does is as it pushes out, it'll pivot slightly. And this is to pull the caliper back in. When it centers back up, it'll pull the caliper back just a little. As your brake linings wear, it'll go past the point to where it can't pivot. It has to slide a little bit, so that adjusts it out continuously so that you always have a full brake pedal. Now if you'll notice in this illustration, the piston moves but the seal doesn't. Now when you release the brake pedal, the piston will be pulled back by the seal, and that'll take the pressure off your pads. Now when the piston moves past the tolerance of the seal, it'll move the seal to compensate for the pad wear. Now if you have a four piston caliper, then one of the pistons could be not returning back, and it's forcing the brake shoe to continuously heat up the rotor. What's strange is when we get back to the shop, you'll notice that whichever one is heating up will be popping, and what it is it's still trying to roll. Most likely when I put this in park, it won't roll to park. You know how it clips when it hits park? How it clicks when it hits park. And you may even notice that your truck will sit there for a little bit. You'll hear it popping, and then you'll see it actually roll, and that's because that caliper is frozen up and keeping that wheel from turning. Now let's get out here with our heat gun and let's see what the temperature is. Let's see if this thing, if I put it in park, see if it'll roll. It wants to roll there. See, it didn't roll. Now why didn't it roll? It's not rolling. And that's another point. If you look, I'm headed down. Why didn't the truck roll to a park? Here, it's rolling slowly. Now I suspect it being this side here. Let's see what the temperature is on it. All right, temperature is 12 on the center. Listen. Look at the opposing side. There. 225. It's over double the temperature. Let's look for rear ones. We'll see what they're showing. They're showing slightly warmer than the front ones. And you don't hear any noise coming from them. Now this part of the diag, process is really quite simple, and we won't buy anything we don't actually need. So what it boils down to, it's pretty simple really. If we loosen this up and our rotor frees up, then we know it's in this part of our brake system, and it's either the ABS, the master cylinder, or this line has been pinched somewhere. Now then, if it doesn't loosen the rotor up, come around here to the bleeder. Now if it loosens the rotor up this time, then we know that it's in our hose, because we already eliminated the other half. It's in our hose. If it doesn't loosen up, then it's either our pads are binding up, our slide pins are binding up, or one of our two pistons or both pistons are binding up. Now we already knew that this side was frozen. Now this rotor is completely cooled down. It's at regular temperature. Now I can't turn it. Now I did have to hit the brakes to bring it in. Versus this side over here. And that's what it should have done to begin with. Let's fix that wire. So let's take us a little bit of a, see if we can move it with this. Yep, we can move it with that. Now, what I've done is I've went in, pumped the brakes back up. Where this is locked up is we're going to break the line loose here. If our pressure goes away, then it's in this section. It's either ABS, or if you get out in the woods You run over some stops, one may have bent one up and pinched it shut. It'll cause the same thing. There's a lot more pressure coming towards this than there is return spring, so it won't return like it will on the force side. So let's break this loose and see if we get anything here. Now, if you noticed earlier in the video, when I broke this loose, we didn't have a drip. We had a little bit run out, but we didn't have a drip. Normally these are drip when you take the lines loose. Let's see if that makes any difference on us. All right, see, it's starting to run out and it's starting to drip. All right, let's see if this thing will come loose now. Now I'm gonna put my screwdriver back in there and we'll see if we can get it to move. See, that's awfully hard to move. See how that's starting to drip? That's a good sign. That says that none of this is where our problem is. It's going to be in our hose. I already knew that. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to tighten that back up. I am going to replace that brake line, but just some key points I kind of was going to leave out. Now let's break this beater loose and see if it moves. You hear the air? I don't know if you heard it or not. Let's see if I can move this by hand. Now it's still frozen. No, it's loose. I've got a lot of resistance here. Now we know this has been getting hot and this has been really getting hot. I'm going to take this caliper off and I'm going to check these slide pins and see if we can improve that. It may have overheated this to where that them pistons don't slide back like they used to, or like they're supposed to. I think my slide pins is good because I think I did check them once. Yeah, see how free that top one is? See how easy it is for me to move it back forward? Well, if you think about it, now I'm doing that, there. I moved that just that easy. This thing's still super hard to turn, and I think it's got something to do with that damn joint more than it does anything. All right, let's and see if this pushed back and see how much fluid shoots out of it. I don't know what the heck's coming out of that, but it's nasty. Now, look at that crap coming out of there. Well, this thing needs to be flushed, that's for sure. So I do, in fact, think I'm wrong. I think we're going to have a hose. Just by looking at this, the way this worked, if you're just replacing pads, that's how it would normally work. Well, that does it for this video. On our next video, we'll go through and show you what it takes to replace our brake line and to bleed it out. And I'm a one-man band, so I've got tools to do it by myself. And I can show you some tricks that'll help you do it if you have to do it by yourself, or at least get you in the neighborhood until you get somebody else. Because if you, like me, sometimes you only have one vehicle to drive, so you may have to do it yourself. You're stuck somewhere. All right, thank you for watching. I'm James Noble.